Welcome to the Consulting Growth Podcast. I have the absolute pleasure today of being joined by Olly Purnell, one of the co-founders of Q5, who I'm sure you all know about. Olly, welcome to the podcast.
Joe, thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here with you.
Lovely. And you're in your London office. I can tell by the lovely Palladian architecture behind you.
Yeah, we're our HQ in London is in Smith Square, which you've been to, you've visited, Joe. And it was once upon a time for 50 years, it was the Conservative Central Office. And we host Margaret Thatcher's
Wow.
corner office in this building, which is now where people have their lunch. But it's a grand old building in a very nice and very quiet square, very close to the Houses of Parliament.
It's really nice, and it's tucked away, and it's nice and quiet. But you're certainly, if you were doing any public sector work, you're certainly in the heart of things, aren't you?
Yep, and you see all sorts of cabinet ministers and the mayor of London and various other people walking through Smith Square every day. So it's a hubbub of activity. But that wasn't the reason actually that we moved to Smith Square. But it is certainly one of the bonuses for us
Great.
being here. Yeah.
Good stuff. Now, listen. You had a long and illustrious career. You're a career consultant. I noticed from your profile. After finishing your English degree, you went straight into consulting and haven't really looked back since. Is that right?
That's right. Yes, I'm from a family of lawyers and decided at a very young age not to follow in those footsteps. And I went into consulting straight after I graduated from university, and I've been in it for 30 years. So I just celebrated my 30th anniversary
Wow.
last month. Yeah,
And you've still got your hair.
yeah, I still have my hair, which is good in the cold winter months.
Indeed.
It's very
Oh,
handy, Joe. Yes.
I'm just jealous. So listen. So tell us a little bit about what took you up to founding Q5.
The thing I set the company up with four other people, and they are four people, two of whom are still in the company with me, and they were people who'd been working for about 15 years. So all five of us shared that, and we were at a stage in our career in our late 30s where we all knew that we wanted to be and enjoyed working in smaller businesses, smaller companies, and we were at a stage in our lives with very small kids where we thought if we don't do it now, we might never get round to setting up a company. But none of my co-founders knew each other. I knew them all. I was
Oh,
the sort of
wow.
common denominator, so I knew each of them, and they didn't know each other. So it was a bit like a manufactured pop band, that Simon Cowell might put together for
Right.
something.
Yes, yes, but with more substance, I'm sure.
Well, I hope so. Hope so. But
So Q5 is a traditional partnership. Um,
well, it was. It isn't now,
oh
actually.
yes, of
So,
course.
so yes, so yes. So it's a really good question. So we did set up as a traditional partnership when there were just five of us,
Yep.
and our plan going back to 2008, 2009 was to create a London-based business, largely working in the media and entertainment world, which most back then, most of those big brands in that sector were based in London, and a few other London-based projects. And the plan was to be able to easily get in from our homes and not to spend months and months away from our loved ones doing out of town assignments. So I think anyone listening to this, anyone that's set up a company, there's always some sort of trigger, and there's always an allergic reaction that they've had at places that they've worked in the past that they're trying to remedy through what they're doing. And I'm sure that that will be the case for people that have left Q5 over the years too. That you create something that you think will suit the common good of the people that
Yes.
you're working with. But yes, that was the sort of provenance of what we did.
I once wrote a paper looking at the allergic reaction that many seniors at Arthur Anderson had to the new culture in Accenture. and the dozens, if not hundreds, of consultancies that were created as a result of that. It's a very interesting
Well,
topic.
they're big moments, aren't they? And I was there. I was there back then, and I've met George Shaheen, who, when I started my career, the managing partner of Anderson Consulting at the time was a very charismatic American chap called George Shaheen, who's in his 80s now. And I really didn't know him back in 1995, but he managed to oversee the divorce of Anderson Consulting from Arthur Anderson, and then in a matter of time, there was the IPO, but he left before the IPO, and he was rabidly against it back in the day. He didn't want to be involved in that, and he knew the genie was out of the lamp, out of the bottle, and he basically decided he wanted to go and do something different. But I know that come, I think it was 0101 when the name changed to Accenture, and then it IPO'd shortly after that, I think, if I remember correctly.
Mm,
I think a lot of people at that time thought, let's move on from here, because we were really, keen to be part of a partnership. We set our company up, to answer your question, which I haven't finished off. But the thing is, it becomes much more complicated if your business is successful. And we've been very lucky in the
mm,
sense that we've got about 300 employees now, and we've got offices in Muscat and Riyadh and Sydney and Melbourne and New York and Houston, as well as here. So you're operating across completely different continents. You're working in Saudi rials and Aussie dollars and sterling, and the good old fashioned LLP model for a multi geography company that plans to continue growing
mm,
becomes slightly more complicated. So we had a corporate restructure a couple of years ago, and we still use the partner
mm,
titles, but we now have shares in the company, and there are
yeah.
about 45 shareholders in the business at this point, all of them within the company. So everyone that owns, we don't have any
Great,
external investors in the business at this point.
great, great. And tell us a little bit about that, about the strains that are put on a partnership by expansion, and whether it's something that you get to a point and you think this model simply isn't working for what we want to achieve, or whether there's very specific, I don't know, financial restructuring that needs to take place in order to achieve your goals. So what drove that?
So really, the success of the business. So a lot of people have set up consulting firms over the years. Certainly in the 30 years I've been working, and some have done really, really, really well. And there are some amazingly talented people I know who are far more intelligent than I am, and some of my co-founders are and were, but they didn't quite. Managed to create a consulting brand that really worked. And so for us, as we've never stood still. So we set up as a funny little thing in the basement of a building in near Smith Square.
Mm,
And the first 2 years, it was just the five of us using a few contractors. But it became obvious to us that we weren't going to be able to grow the business if we used the associate model. And we were very, very determined to create a consulting brand. First and foremost, we wanted to create a consulting brand. So I think the first realization was about 2 years into the company that, we could do fine if it was just the five of
mm,
us using associates, but you can't really grow a business. And I'd be really interested to know if anyone has, beyond the Eden McCullums of this world, who are great, great companies, but they're nothing of the size and scale of the Baringas or the Barclay Partnerships or the Q5s of this world. That you're talking about a handful of people with very, very, very good database of freelancers. For us, we wanted to build something that had momentum, and therefore we realized that in order to do that, you needed to hire really good people who felt they had some skin in the game. And
mm,
so that we were sort of 2.5 years into Q5 when we hired our first two or three consultants into the business, of which two of them are still here. So that was 2011, and those two are still in the business. One of whom is a very senior member of my leadership team.
great, great. Well, I guess that testament to your culture. And this isn't smoke that I'm blowing. So I know before I met you and the London Brigade, I knew or know the Cardiff Q5 group very well, and they've given a lot of support to my students, my MBA students, and the business school over the years. And I guess it's one thing that has stood out when dealing with them is that, how do I put it? So they just seem to be a good bunch. They seem to be people that you would like to work with, that aren't primarily driven by getting as much cash in the bank and driving up utilization, getting the project margins up as high as possible. Although I might have landed at the minute now. You might be up
No,
the
no, no, no. I mean, it's a really good point. We're not. We are. I imagine every consulting business would say we're very different from the others. I think we are quite different from the others because I'm in awe of companies that can have multi-year contracts with their clients. I mean, that really ought to be the holy grail for us.
sure.
But we never set our company up to do that to begin with. We are all about organizational health and organizational performance. And our typical clients are either those who have just acquired another business and they're wanting to work on a post acquisition bit of reconfiguration to hit some new targets, or they may be in rapid growth and we're helping them look at their 3-year strategy and how to operationalize it. Or it may be a company that's had a very difficult year or two that has to take cost out quickly.
Mm,
And in each of those instances, those are pieces of work that you typically do in 8 to 12 weeks. That's not something you say, "Oh, we'll come in. We'll look at your addressable cost basis and we'll spend 3 years on your
yep,
books."
yep,
That's just not what they're looking for. And similarly, we work with a huge amount of private equity firms um, on all sorts of things, which I unfortunately can't talk to you now, Joe,
sure.
about.
Yes.
But private equity know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly where every uh, bit of unit cost is, and they don't bring us in saying, "Look, just have the run of it. Charge us on an hourly rate, and we'll see you in 20 months' time."
Sure.
So we work typically on about 150 different client projects a year, and it's an extremely exhausting and
Mm,
relentless business model. So you've got lots of projects on at any given time. We always have a very, very small bench to help us write proposals, and but we're not on long-term multi-year deals. So our business model's never been dependent on just chasing the revenue. So the people that you met in Cardiff are typical Q5ers that are there to help and will work quickly. And it's all about building strong relationships and building the community of people that know about us, so that in when the right project comes along, they'll remember us and they'll call us up.
yes. Yeah. Great. Great. And you mentioned the organizational health bit. Tell me, if you would, a little bit more about what that means in practice and why a client would come to Q5 for that, as opposed to one of the very large firms that might do post transaction integration, etc.
Yeah. So to answer that, I mean, I can answer that question in a couple of ways. Firstly, what do we mean by organizational health? So I'll explain a little bit about that, and then I can tell you why you'd come to us rather than to one of the really big firms. The first thing on when we talk about organizational health and organizational performance is how successful is a CEO or their top team going to be in moving their organization from A to B? So our going in position usually is the CEO has some sort of clue as to where they want to take the business. Not always, but 95% of the
Mm,
time they do. And therefore, we're looking at, does the strategy make sense? Is there the financial undertakings? Do they have the financial performance to enable them to get there? Do they have the right investment in place to get there? Are the processes that they've got in place enabling, are they going to be effective and efficient enough to get them there? Are the structures that they've got in place correctly allocated and configured? And have they got the right human beings with the right skill sets to deliver that? So it's sort of multifaceted thing. And we will do a health check on each of those different criteria. we then will help them navigate from A to B over a period of time. So we're operationalizing what's in the CEO's brain and what's on their, on their
Mm.
strategic plan. So that's what we mean by organizational health. We have an amazing platform that we started building about 3, 4 years ago called Org Maps, which we invest hundreds of thousands of pounds a month in. It's brilliant. It takes any data from any Oracle, Workday, SAP. It doesn't matter what ERP system you use, and we use that, a combination of the system we've created plus some AI tech that helps us look at spans and theirs analysis, helps us look at how resources allocated across different geographies, and it's a really clever bit of kit. And so our team are brilliant facilitators, brilliant org design and operating model experts that are underpinned by what we think is the best tech out there in order to do that job. Now, why us, other than the fact that we have brilliant people who are expert at this type of work with the best platform in the business for doing that work, is we set up this company ourselves. So we are very commercial. We've opened up offices in lots of other geographies. We've created the brand ourselves. We've invested in the business ourselves. We've taken no external investment from anyone else. We've taken no public money to do it. So we're ruthlessly commercial. And rather than just following, chapters 15, 16, and 17, the consulting handbook, we feel that we can go toe to toe with business leaders and business owners. So we bear in mind, quite a lot of our clients are fellow founders who set up extraordinarily successful businesses, and they would rather hear it from people that have also done something
Mm.
similar than to go to a big four firm. So that's another reason why people come to us.
Thank
Sounds
you.
terribly vain and terribly arrogant what I just said, but you've asked a very specific question,
It
so I
is,
wanted to
yes.
answer it
Yes, but
realistically.
if the co-founder and the manager, CEO can't blow the trumpet of their own firm, then something's wrong. So you did that. You did that very, very well. Now it's you. You've grown. Apart from what we've talked about now, you've grown pretty quickly to nearly 500 people, and over 16 years. But I deal with plenty of firms who have been going 16 years, 17 years, and have got to 50, 100 people, and you've done that without external funding.
Hmm.
What I don't want to use the phrase gearing mechanisms, but very often there are very specific levers that are pulled in order to get there. And very often that's around investment or mergers and acquisitions. But you haven't gone down that route. So what?
We
What?
have, we have done some asset purchases over the years.
Okay.
So we have brought in 3 different companies over the last probably 10 years. Uh, in this country, we merged with a company called Maxim back about 10 years ago, 2015. So there was a company that had been running for about 15, 16 years, and they came into our business
Okay.
then. And that was quite a step change for us. How old were we? We were 6 years old at that point,
Wow.
and it probably added 2.5 to 3 million in revenue to we were probably on 5 or 6 million at that point, and it added
Yep.
2.5 to 3 million, and a bunch of new relationships. And we did something similar when we opened our Houston office a few years ago. So we took on a company called MPC Consulting, and the same in Sydney a few years ago too. So we have done things where
Hmm.
we've I wouldn't call it, I don't really like to call it acquisition, because it's more like a merger where, but our brand is the one that we take forward because
Sure.
it's better known.
Sure. On the organic growth side, what what mechanisms did you put in place to enable that?
Um, on the organic growth side, what mechanisms? Sorry, the words you're asking, they're
Yeah.
brilliant. They're brilliant words, but I've never really
So,
thought.
so I'm thinking of, so Beringa's partnership model is
Yeah.
very is a very highly incentivized one where you poach partners from X, you give them a target of Y, you whack in a team behind them, and then you'll, in effect, they'll go and do that. But it doesn't strike me that Q5 has that type of culture. So I guess I'm trying to rather clumsily unearth the secrets of your growth success, apart
Yeah.
from good looks and charm.
Do you know, so yeah, I will answer that question, but it's interesting because I think every model has its day.
Mm,
And I think if you go back in time, I never met my either of my grandfathers, but they because they died before I was born. But they would have had final salary, brilliant final salary pensions. In fact, my grandfather, who was a director at Rentokil, my grandmother was widowed for about 45 years, lived very, very handsomely for many
great.
years, thanks to the pension that my grandfather left for her. That model, sadly, I've been working for 30 years. That model wasn't one that
No,
I went into, and it was a cash purchase scheme from day one. But the reason why they scrapped that over a number of years, they still have it, I think, in public sector, but hopefully they'll scrap that too in time.
I
But
think
is
it's
because it's just
pretty much on now.
yeah, it's unsustainable.
Mm,
You can't just, you can't build a model that you eventually can't pay for. I think the model that Baringa have put in place was an amazing model to move the original founders of that business on,
mm,
and to also reward the next generation of partners that came into the business 15, 20 years ago to enable a chapter of intense growth. And my goodness me, they've done a remarkable job at growing that business. But that model is not going to last forever. That model, particularly in the new world order with AI and all the tools that you've got, it's a highly leveraged model. It's reliant on armies of young, very bright people doing all the business analysis that are being billed for, you know, several £1,000s per day, and that model is moving away. So
mm,
that model itself is going to, uh, in time, grind to a halt. Now, with our model, it's always been about building our influence in building our trust and authority in organizational health and organizational performance. So everything we do, every event we do, every piece of marketing we do, that has to be anchored back to that. So we won't go and do something that is way off
yep,
piste.
yep.
So we're really, really slavishly devoted to that topic. The second thing, in the mindset of everyone that's joined the business and has been here for many years, and anyone that joins the business is given something called the manual. We have a 175-page book called
Oh
a
wow,
manual that is updated probably every 18 months. And it
right.
tells you everything you need to know about the provenance of the business, what we mean by influence, reach, and contribution, which is what I'm telling you about at the moment.
Yep.
So, how you extend your reach into new industry sectors, into new geographies, and how we drive a contribution, how we drive profitable growth in the business. So people from a very early stage of their careers here are taught the sort of the Q5 way of doing things. So that organic thing isn't so organic that it's just some mysterious,
Mm,
nebulous thing. We have a book of words, and it is actually printed out as well, so people can carry it around in their laptop cases in case they ever want to flick through it, written like an old manual that you'd get when you bought a car. So if you're not some petrol head that wants to read from page 1 to page 175 and you just want to know what happens when you've got a
mm,
puncture, you look down the back and it will tell you, what to do. We've got exactly the same thing. So it could
great,
be you're in a competitive tendering process. How do you play to win? How are you going to pitch the company in a way that elevates it against
mm.
people in a big four firm, for example, or someone that's representing an MBB firm. So we've a lot of thinking's gone into this, and it's carried, and it built upon every year.
That's really interesting and quite unusual as well in this. At this time you can, but I like the idea of having a physical copy because it's so bloody. You're tied to your laptop or your screen or your phone so commonly now. It must be quite nice to have something that's a bit more tangible in your hands.
Yes, I mean it's pretty thick, as I say, it's 175 pages, so it's not something you can stick in your pocket. but the paper copy, not everyone wants it. Obviously, you can have a look at it online too, but I think the paper copy is popular for the reasons you just mentioned. And funnily enough, I've got it out before in meetings to show clients. I've actually given a few away to clients that say we need something like this here.
Mm, mm,
Um, it's really like that handy guide to how we do things around here, and it's an articulation of just what we think is the best approach. It's not the method, but it's a lot of encouragement to work in a
sure.
particular way.
Yeah. Okay. So that kind of prompts an interesting question, which you might say the grounds of the question are false. So, but we can stop there. But there's an interesting argument to say that consultancy is changing. That is always changed. I've been doing this for 25 years, and if I had a pound for every time that somebody said that consultancy was dead, I'd be all broken or disrupted. I'd be a wealthy man. Well, I'd have at least £10. Um, but there is a fair bit of change, especially with AI, especially with internationalization, especially with the build to sell model that has been quite popular, with private equity money coming in, clients getting more sophisticated, different pricing models, more tech, and all the rest of it. How do you balance that? I guess strong culture, that almost Bible of, or the handbook of how things are done, with and although you're not a partnership anymore, there's a lot of features of partnership. It's certainly
Hmm.
to see everyone had a good chat about things, as opposed to some companies of a similar size that we could both mention. There would be one person in the room shouting what was right,
Hmm.
um, what they felt was right. How do you balance those two aspects with sort of the partnership type of governance that has changed, but is I guess is still there, the strong culture, the handbook, versus the dynamics and the change that the consultancy industry seems to be going under at the moment?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's well observed, Joe.
Thank
Um, so yes, we run our business. A partnership's like a club, and we run our company still a bit like a club in a way, in the sense that you've observed it. You've come into one of our meetings. We don't run it like an autocracy. I mean,
you.
it is a little bit of an autocracy in the sense that we don't sit there voting for things, but we all have a voice. Everyone has a voice, and that's just the way we've always been. So that is quite similar to the old partnership structure. However, we're in a position now where in our structure that we've had for the last couple of years or so, we're in a position where if we wanted to raise some capital, it's much easier for us to do
Mm,
so now. We could do it in many ways, as you know. And I think we've got a much more adaptable business model and business structure for the next 5 to 10 years, in the sense that we are building stuff. So one of the problems, I think, for any firm, whether you're a partnership, any consulting firm, whether you're a partnership or a limited company, is the bets that we're all having to make right now over where we invest in building our own tech and developing our own AI. The brilliance of the human capital consulting model hitherto has been that you've not really had to make any investment other in just hiring people and buying
sure.
some laptops. Whereas now, you're having to spend, you have to focus on what is it that you're going to back. And I've seen a lot of businesses over the last 3 to 5 years invest huge sums of
Mm,
money and waste huge sums of money in things that they thought sounded good at the time, but actually was either too soon, too pioneering, too ahead of the
yeah.
game, or was superseded in a matter of weeks by some other, by Anthropic or someone else that had come up
Yes.
with something that was much, much better. For us, we have built something that we've always been doing, which is looking at operating model effectiveness and efficiency. So our tooling, there are competitors out there. There are companies like Orgview, good companies that have got their own product that don't actually have an advisory business like we've got.
Mm.
So we've created something that we use, everyone in our company uses on a day-to-day business. So I think our bet is a safe bet. Our org maps is plugged into 75% of our clients now. So
Wow.
yeah, I mean, you're talking about 80, 90 companies
Wow.
using it.
Great.
It's highly successful, but it requires piloting. So it requires art. There are some companies who've just got it, so they fiddle around with themselves.
Yep.
But the majority of people are not buying it as a software. It wasn't built as a software as a service. It's built as a brilliant tool that you'd use when you
Mm.
needed it at point of need. So to answer your question, I think the bets that consulting firms are having to make right now are the biggest bets that they've ever had to make,
Mm.
and it requires uh, dynamism, entrepreneurialism, real creative thinking about what their companies stand for, and where they should be investing and the sort of things that they'd be investing in. If you're an all things to all people, if you're one of those sort of generalist consulting firms, I think they're going to struggle a little bit,
Mm.
because where do you bet your money? Do you place it in strategic tooling? Do you place it in looking at, I don't know, process excellence? Do you look at operating model efficiencies? Where
Mm.
do you invest in the tech? Who's going to shout the loudest in the boardroom? So I think it is a pivotal moment. I'm incredibly excited by it. We can see in our own business we've had a real uptick in performance and in financial performance over the last year or so. We can see that org maps is really appreciated. It's making our team much more efficient and much more productive in what they do,
Okay.
and the outputs that we're able to share with our clients are they're so much better than we had maybe 5 years ago. It's much
Gosh.
much
Okay.
much better.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a question now that we could spend 2 days talking about, but I would love you to get it down in a very unloyally fashion down to a few minutes. So you've grown much larger than many boutiques could dream of. Um, what 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 either inflection points or key learnings did you have you had on that journey where you thought either perhaps I made the wrong decision there, let's pull it back, um, or I made the right decision, but thank God, thank God I did.
Yeah, the best decision we ever made was, other than setting the company up, was the decision that we made in March, April 2020, where Sharon Rice Oxley, who one of my co-founders, and I spent about 2 hours on the phone to one another, just at the point where the lockdowns were called for COVID, and we were looking at lots of companies. I mean, look at Topshop, basically sacked 20,000 people, I think. I mean,
Mm.
I ought to add allegedly, but I mean,
Okay.
something at the time, you had some companies just getting rid of lots and lots and lots of people. And a number of the consulting firms in April 2020, you can go back and Google it, let people go. And we decided that rather than let people go, we had 6 force majeure letters coming in over the course of two
Wow.
weeks from people terminating us, suggesting that COVID was an act of God, which is
Okay.
an interesting, slightly oxymoronic thing to suggest. Yet their websites were saying it's business as usual. And we decided that the most senior people in the business, of which there were probably 8 or 9 at the time, wouldn't pay ourselves a salary for the next 6 months. And we wouldn't take our profit share from the previous year that was still sitting there, because it
Wow.
was March
Okay.
and our fiscal year runs from April to March. So
Sounds
we
like
would
Christmas.
we would suck it up. We would
Right.
suck it
Okay.
up, and because it bought us some time. So our strategy was, let's buy some time, and that was the best thing we ever did, because everyone looks back now and realized within a matter of weeks, because of Microsoft, because of Google, because of Zoom, because of everything that we now use every day of every week, um, people quickly adopted it, we discovered that the only thing one could do during lockdown was work, because you couldn't go on holiday, you
Oh,
couldn't
yes.
go to the art gallery, you couldn't go and watch a film or go to the movies or anything. So everyone worked, and 2020 to 2021, there were a lot. Many other consulting firms probably lost out on 12 months of rapid growth. We went from a 21.2 million pound revenue business to a 31 million revenue business to a 49 million
Oh,
revenue business over the course of 24 months. And that was the thing that accelerated our growth. And I'm convinced that that decision that we made back in March 2020 was absolutely pivotal for that. And I look back and think, just imagine if we'd done what a number of
mm,
other firms had done at the time. Egremont fired about 30 people.
yes. Yes,
Three
I
or
remember.
four of them came to us. I mean, a bewilderingly daft thing to do. I'm sorry, no disrespect to them,
Sure.
but a poor call, not
Yes.
one that you could say 5 years on made a lot of sense. Um, but that was one of the things. And regrets, I don't really have many regrets. Sometimes you make the wrong decision on people, I think. I don't think we've ever done anything. I don't have any regrets where we've opened an office in Hong Kong, which we had for 2 years. It didn't work. We opened it up in 2017, and I think we understood then that we'd bitten off much more than we could chew. I think we got it wrong. We did it slightly sentimentally because one of our co-founders was and still is married to someone who had a very brilliant and senior job in the Foreign Office, and she was moved over to Hong Kong. So it just made sense to see if we could create
Yeah,
something
yeah.
there, but it just didn't work.
It's
Um,
interesting. Both of the things you mention are very much a reflection of the culture. I would say having certainly that keeping people on and not sacking them immediately, I think is a great reflection of the culture that you've got there, but also that decision. A lot of companies wouldn't have done that, and perhaps it didn't work in the long term, but you clearly built some type of relationships, and solidified people's prediction of how you would act in future. I
Well, that's certainly the. I mean, it's something that we joke about now, but the reason we ended up opening in America 12 years ago was really, based on a love story rather than some strategic
ah,
imperative, where one
lovely.
of our team fell in love with a woman that they're now married to and has 3 kids by, and she was moved to New York with her company, and he was left here, and he was just this sort of lovesick, forlorn fool.
Okay,
So he
right.
said, "Go over to New York and see what you can do," and that's how we opened up the business. But I do think there you watch things like Dragon's Den on telly and The Apprentice. I know it's all made for TV
Sure.
formats, but business is all about human beings doing wonderful things, and hopefully creating some value for doing it. It's all about people. It's all about personalities. It's all about building trust,
Mm.
building relationships. And there's a lot of artistry to business, and there's a lot of instinct to business. And I think sometimes people try and have it another way, make it much more scientific, but it's not. It's much more like a friendship or a relationship that you have with someone, and you want a long-term friendship with your pal, and you want a long-term relationship, if you love your spouse as I do, with your spouse. And that's the same in business. You want to create long-term value creating relationships with your clients and with your teams. The team, there isn't anyone at Q5, and this sounds like I'm sort of bringing out the violins now. There isn't a single person in this business that I don't really care about, because they could work anywhere that they want. And I'm really, really, really pleased that they come and work at Q5.
Well, I for my I run a consulting leaders club, and we get together every month and have a chat about various challenges. And a couple of months ago, I did a comparison of Q5, Baringa, and Elixir, which was
Right.
which was quite interesting. And Q5 had the best what do you call it, Glassdoor results at the time, and certainly that strength of culture came across quite strongly.
It's a different. It's interesting. You touched on Glassdoor. Glassdoor is the bête noire, I think, of most
Yes,
business
yes,
leaders.
yes, I
And
agree.
there are, if you love the place that you work, if I love a place, I go on holiday. I don't go on to TripAdvisor and say, please come here. It's my little secret. I don't, if I find a place I really, really love and my family enjoys, you don't necessarily want everyone to go and discover that place yourself. And I think on Glassdoor, because it's interesting, there are firms, I think Baringa have very good Glassdoor scores too. I know that Elixir don't, but they have a very, very performance, quite an aggressive performance culture at Elixir. I don't imagine the senior team care that much about what's on Glassdoor. On Glassdoor, there's not much you can do to manipulate it. I would not go round all our employees and say, please put lovely things on Glassdoor. So, I mean, it's interesting. I think that for young people going into jobs today, coming out of university today, I think consulting is a brilliant place to start your career, to get a good taste of different industry sectors, see the sorts of sector that really motivates you. And I think that's where it's interesting. I think you want to go to a firm that has a culture of care and
Yes.
a culture of sort of reciprocity. You come here, you give us everything you've got, and we'll teach you how to do a good job. So I'm proud of that. If you're looking at those social media channels, and I mean, I heard the other day from someone that they'd heard about Q5 on TikTok. And I wasn't even aware that we were on TikTok, and we're not on TikTok. But we have this program called the Youth Panel, where 16 and 17-year-olds can apply and come and do some paid work while they're in the sixth form at school. And normally we get about 40, 50 people who apply for it. This year we had 980 people apply. And we couldn't work out why suddenly it gone viral until I discovered there were about 4 or 5 TikTok influencers drawing attention to this youth panel. You too can work in a consulting firm and earn when you're only 17. And I couldn't believe it. It was a young lad that told me he
Wow.
heard all about Q5 on TikTok. So,
Oh,
this whole social media, whether it's Glassdoor, whether it's
yeah,
TikTok, whether
yeah.
it's Instagram, um, so many people are learning about consulting firms and the work they do through those channels. And we have to be on it. You've got to be
Isn't
absolutely.
that
You've got to know what to
interesting?
do with it. Yeah.
I, I have enough trouble getting partners on LinkedIn. TikTok is going to be perhaps in next year. I need to be pushing partners on TikTok.
Well, give it a go. Give it a go, Joe.
Good.
Don't start. Don't start with me though.
No, no. Listen, okay. A final question, Ollie.
Yeah.
What does the future hold for Q5? What are your plans? What should we be excited about seeing over the next 2 or 3 years?
So, if no one here has ever heard of org maps, because I have been trailing it all through our conversation, that's very exciting, and we have not marketed it hard enough. So be prepared for in 26, 27, 28, much more noise around it. We're taking it on a world tour
Okay, great.
to go to different geographies where we have offices, and actually we're going to do live sessions showcasing it. So that would be like a rock star goes on a
Yes,
world
yes.
tour. We're
You're all
taking
over
org
TikTok.
maps. We're all over it, and different partners are going to be showcasing it. So we're going to do live events. And we hopefully will be opening more offices and extending the reach of our business. But our big bet is on building our, not only org maps, we have something called Activity Queue. And we got a very good bit of tech that we use for strategic workforce planning. So we're building a lot more tooling for our teams to use with very senior leaders. So that's the exciting thing, which we're going to be banging the drum about for
Brilliant.
the next 2 years.
Ollie, thank you for your time. Congratulations on all you've achieved so far, and best of luck for the future.
Joe, thank you for hosting me today. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and yeah, see you soon. I hope.
I hope so. Take care. Cheerio.
Cheers now.